So says Pierre Anton. When he decides that there is no meaning to life, leaves the classroom, climbs a plum tree, and stays there. And then he says these things and throws plums at people. His friends and classmates cannot get him to come down, not even by pelting him with rocks. So to prove to him that there is meaning to life, they set out to build a heap of meaning in an abandoned sawmill. But it soon becomes obvious that each person cannot give up what is most meaningful to them. So they begin to decide for one another what the others must give up. The pile is started with a lifetime's collection of Dungeons and Dragons books, a fishing rod, a pair of green sandals, a pet hamster. But then, as each demand becomes more extreme, things start taking a very morbid twist, and the kids become ever more desperate to get Pierre Anton down. And what if, after all these sacrifices, the pile is not meaningful enough? So they got their pile of dead bodies and trinkets. And then the cops found out. And they all got grounded. And nobody knew what they did. Which they were very upset about because the whole point was for Pierre Anton to come and see the pile. So they called the news. They called the media. Told them what they did, but pretended like it wasn't them that was calling. And then the media got involved, and now it's an international art sensation. People all around the world are arguing over this pile. And these strange psychopaths that made it. Oh, the best part was when Pierre Anton didn't look at the pile. They were like, if he hears about it in the news, he'll have to come and look. And he just didn't. He just said no and left. Chapter 21. It was a big museum in New York that settled matters. It was referred to by an odd abbreviation that sounded like something a child couldn't pronounce properly. But however silly its name sounded, it put a stop to the whole furious debate once and for all. Maybe it was the MoMA. Is that in New York? It was a big museum in New York that settled matters. It was referred to by an odd abbreviation that sounded like something a child couldn't pronounce properly. But however silly its name sounded, it put a stop to the whole furious debate once and for all when it bid $3.5 million for the heap of meaning. Excuse me. $3.5 million. Suddenly, everyone knew that the heap of meaning was art, and that only an uninitiated ignoramus could say otherwise. Even the art critic from the biggest of the local newspapers backtracked and said that he'd now considered the heap more closely, and that it was indeed a work of near genius. comprising what perhaps was a quite novel and original interpretation of life's meaning. He had only seen the work from the front the first time. He wrote, $3.5 million sounded like a fair amount of money, we thought, without really being able to grasp how much it actually was. Through the lawyer who had been hired to represent us, we nevertheless insisted that the heap of meaning cost $3 million. Okay, hold on. I can't read right now. He's like, oh, I missed the severed finger. And I finally found out what that rag represents. I forgot I wanted to smoke before I started this. So let's give it a few more puffs. Yeah, that's good. $3.5 million sounded like a fair amount of money, we thought, without really being able to grasp how much it actually was. Through the lawyer we had hired to represent us, we nevertheless insisted that the heap of meaning cost $3,600,000 on the basis that you should never sell anything cheaper than what you can get for it. Indeed, we actually ended up asking for $3,620,000. So there'd also be enough to pay the church for the Jesus on the rosewood cross, who was no longer in a fit state to be returned anywhere. The museum accepted, and the deal was closed. The only thing remaining to agree on was a date for when the heap of meaning would be collected. To be sure, there were a lot of papers and permissions and other stuff to be dealt with before the heap could be moved across national borders or boundaries, but at the same time, despite an unusually cold spring, the perishable parts of the heap were perishing rather more rapidly with every day that passed. The museum eventually decided on April 8th, 4.5 weeks from the day. Then the museum people and their lawyers left Tering, and with them the world's press, including our own national dailies. Tering was once again exactly the same as Tering had always been. Dull, duller, dullest. It was highly odd. We had found the meaning, and thereby the meaning behind everything. All kinds of experts had declared how magnificent the heap of meaning was. An American museum was paying millions of dollars for it. And yet no one thought it was interesting anymore. We were dumbfounded. Either the heap was the meaning, or else it was not. And since everyone had agreed that it was, it couldn't just stop being it again. Or could it? We walked to and from school, but there wasn't a single camera, Not a single journalist. We went out to the old sawmill. The heap of meaning hadn't changed. It wasn't in any way obvious that little Emil's remains had been removed from the coffin with its cracked paintwork and transferred to a new one. That had then been interred and was now getting all cracked, just like the first. Nothing was any different. And the fact that the heap looked smaller was probably nothing more than an optical illusion, right? A fact it was, however, that January and all our notoriety and the significance that came with it disappeared all at once in the first week of March. Pierre Anton was having a ball. Meaning is meaning. So if you really had found the meaning, you'd still have it. And the world's press would still be here trying to figure out what it was you'd found. But they're not. So whatever it was you found, it wasn't the meaning. Because the meaning doesn't exist. We tried ignoring him, and stuck our noses in the air, and were superior, and both something and someone. At first we were doing so well we almost believed in it ourselves. It helped some to reread all the newspaper cuttings in the scrapbook, and watch all the TV interviews from all the various countries that our parents had recorded on videotape. After a while, though, it was like all the cuttings began to fade. The interviews became tired comedies. And Pierre Anton was having the game all to himself. Doubt took us out one by one. 1, 2, all but one. It was treason, and we weren't letting on to one another. But it could be seen in the way our smiles disappeared and were replaced by a mask that looked exactly like the ones the grown-ups wore, which revealed all too clearly that maybe there wasn't that much that truly mattered. Sophie was the only one of us to stick it out. And eventually it was her pale face alone and her burning eyes that kept the rest of us from giving up. And admitting that Pierre Anton was right. Connor, thank you. Chapter 22. It was spring, but this year spring couldn't reach us. We were almost in 8th grade. New Tearing Jesus on the Rosewood Cross, sponsored by McDonald's, with the golden arches. Thank you, guys. My joy, my honor, my pleasure. Thank you. Excuse me, I had to burp. It was spring, but this year spring could not reach us. We were almost in 8th grade, and it wouldn't be long before we'd be having to choose new schools and new subjects. How on earth were we going to manage that with Pierre Anton reminding us that nothing meant anything? We had no idea. Soon we'd be scattered to the four winds, losing contact with the meaning we had found, and lost again, without exactly knowing how it had all happened. As though to reassure us that it wasn't yet spring at all, March kept sending afterblasts of winter. Late snow fell and melted, and once more again, the snow fell and melted. This time faster. Eranthus and snowdrops hid away, closed and frozen beneath the white. And then when the final layer was gone for good, they pushed themselves up to signal renewal, and spring flush among the few blades of grass that had stayed the winter out in tearing. In Class 7A, we saw neither renewal nor spring flush. What was spring when fall soon would be coming around again? And all that now was germinating simply was to wither and die. How were we to find joy in the beech woods, bursting with leaf? Bursting into leaf, the starlings returning home, or the sun being higher in the sky for every new day that passed. All of it would soon be turning, running back to the other way. Running back the other way until it was cold and dark and there were no flowers and no leaves left on the trees. Spring was nothing but a reminder to us that we too would soon be gone. It just rolled under the table. Fuck. I'm not. It wasn't about you guys. Okay, I was writing something to remember later. Hope that doesn't get mixed up. All right. Death. Everywhere. Spring is always leaving. All right, I gotta turn this off before I go blind. Each time I lifted my arm, an arm, was a reminder of how soon it would be lowered and turn into nothing. Same. Huh. Each time I smiled and laughed, it struck me how often the same mouth, the same eyes, were to cry until one day they would close, and others would go on laughing and crying until they too were put to rest beneath the soil. Only the course of the planets in the sky was eternal. And then, only until Pierre Anton, one morning, started hollering about how the universe was contracting. And that one day it was all going to collapse completely, like a Big Bang in reverse. Everything would become so small and so compact as to amount to almost nothing. Not even the planets bore thinking about. And that's how it was with everything. It was all unbearable. Bearable. Bearing up. All things. Everything. Nothing. We were going around like we didn't exist. Each day was like the next. And even though we looked forward all week to the weekend was always still a disappointment. And then it was Monday again. And everything started over, and that's how life was. And there was nothing else. We began to understand what Pierre Anton meant. And we began to understand why the grown-ups looked the way they did. And although we'd sworn we'd never become like them, that was exactly what was happening. We weren't even 15 yet. 13, 14, adult, dead. Only Sophie still yelled back at Pierre Anton whenever we walked by Terringvay 25 and the Crooked Plum Tree. "The future's all here," Pierre Anton shouted and waved his hand as if to show us that everything had been done and nothing was left for us but tearing and the meaninglessness of it all. The rest of us bowed our heads, but not Sophie. "The future is what we make of it," she yelled back. "Stuff and nonsense," Pierre Anton hollered. "There's nothing to make anything of, because there's nothing that matters." "There's a whole lot that matters." Furious, Sophie hurled a handful of stones in the direction of Pierre Anton. Some of them hit home, though not hard enough to bother him. "Come out to the sawmill, then you'll see what matters." I realized that Sophie really meant what she said. For her, the heap of meaning was the meaning. Or maybe it would be more true to say that the heap of meaning meant something to her that it no longer did to the rest of us. "Your junk doesn't mean a thing. If it did, the world's press would still be here, and all the world's population would be flocking to Terring to get in on the meaning." "You won't see the heap of meaning because you haven't got the guts," Sophie yelled as loud as she could. "If your pile of garbage meant the slightest little thing, then there'd be nothing I'd rather do," Pierre Anton replied condescendingly. "If your little pile of garbage meant anything, there'd be nothing I'd rather do." Then softly, almost pityingly, he added, "But it doesn't. Or else you wouldn't have sold it. Would you?" For the first time since the Innocents, I saw tears in Sophie's eyes. She dried them away so angrily and so quickly with her fist that afterward I wasn't sure I'd seen it. But she said nothing more to Pierre Anton. And from then on, she took another route to and from school. There was just a week until April 8th. A week until the museum would pack, seal, and dispatch the heap of meaning. A week until Pierre Anton was proved right forever. The rest of us had given up without a fight. But still, the thought of Sophie giving up, too, was unbearable. And that was exactly what was happening. Or so I thought. But Sophie didn't give up. Sophie lost her mind.